It is 6 p.m. here in Cairo, time for Egypt News, and we start straight away with the main headlines. The Prime Minister follows up on the executive stance of relocating to the new administrative capital. The European Commission emphasizes the reliance on the UN nuclear watchdog for monitoring Iranian activities. And Zimbabwe's former president, Robert Mugabe, has died at the age of 95. Welcome back. Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli said that he is following up on the executive stance of relocating to the new administrative capital. The Prime Minister noted that he is reviewing the construction work, transportation of employees, the management of the governmental district after the relocation, as well as the digital transformation in the governmental installations. The Prime Minister's remarks were made during his meeting with the Minister of Planning and Administrative Reform to review developments in the government's plan to move to the new capital. For her part, the Minister of Planning and Administrative Reform has reviewed the relocation plan, which includes a guidebook of the concerned authorities' responsibilities and performance indices.
الدولة الوحيدة اللي واقفة على حيلها انتم، قد يكون في أخطاء. قلت لكم المشكلة كبيرة، والمشكلة دي أنا مش هقدر عليها لوحدي، لكن نقدر عليها كلنا. دوري عملته، بس دوركم انتوا دلوقتي. لما طلبتوني لقيتوني، ولم أبخل عليكم بحياتي. جه الدور عليكم وانتوا وعدتوني انكم هتقفوا جنبي. الإصلاح بياخد وقت طويل، ولازم نعترف ان ال6 سنين اللي فاتوا ان احنا دولة ظروفها صعبة. تحيا مصر مش بالكلام.
مفيش أي حل تاني غير إن احنا نشتغل.
شايفة مستقبل أولادي، مستقبل أجيال كتيرة جاية في مصر.
نقدر نعمل أكتر من كده، نقدر نجتهد، نقدر نعمل حاجات كتير في أرضنا.
ما تتخلوش عن بالكم، أنا اخترت الطريق الصعب. انتوا اللي هتحددوا مصير مستقبل مصر بقوة شبابها.
In Sudan, the Prime Minister announced the formation of the first government since the signing of a power-sharing deal signed last month. In a press conference, the Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok announced the names of 18 ministers in the new cabinet and said he would name 2 more later. Hamdok said that the new government would start the work immediately in a harmonious and collective way. Most of the 18 ministers were approved earlier in the week. The cabinet includes 4 women, among them Asma Abdullah, who becomes the country's first female foreign minister. Among the challenges facing Hamdok's government are finding billions in funding to cover the country's bill for the importing basic goods like fuel and flour. The American Defense Secretary Mark Esper and his French counterpart will discuss on Saturday how the French Navy could coordinate with Washington to ensure freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. A senior American defense official said that they recognize that France has an interest in participating in the freedom of navigation, bringing freedom of navigation capabilities to the Gulf. France has ruled out joining the US-led coalition of countries protecting the oil tankers and the cargo ships from the threats posed by Iran in the Strait of Hormuz, but has pushed for a European alternative. The European Commission emphasized the reliance on the UN nuclear watchdog being able to monitor the Iranian activities, as it voiced great concern at Tehran's shrinking back from the nuclear deal. The International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, has a key role in monitoring and verifying the implementation by Iran of the nuclear commitments under the 2015 deal with the world powers. The IAEA in the latest report said it continues to verify the compliance, but it said ongoing interactions require full and timely cooperation by Iran. Iran sent a letter to the European Union's top foreign policy official Federica Mogherini detailing the latest cut to the terms of the deal. Saudi Arabia issued a stern warning to the Yemeni separatists who have seized key parts of the south, saying that any attempt to destabilize Yemen amounted to a threat to the kingdom. Riyadh demanded the separatists return captured military and civilian facilities to the Yemeni government while renewing calls for dialogue. The official Saudi media said that the kingdom stressed that any attempt to destabilize Yemen would be dealt with firmly. It added that the kingdom affirmed the position that there was no alternative to the legitimate government in Yemen. In Britain, the upper house gave final approval to the law that would force Boris Johnson to delay the Brexit in a fresh setback for the British Prime Minister, who has said he would rather die than delay the Brexit. The details in the upcoming report.
Britain's Labour Party said it held positive talks on Friday with fellow opposition parties as they seek to prevent the country leaving the European Union without a deal. Conservative Prime Minister Boris Johnson is pushing for an election on October 15th, 2 weeks before the United Kingdom is due to leave the EU, though opposition parties say they want a no-deal Brexit ruled out before they will agree to an election date. A Labour Party source said it would not back Johnson's bid on Monday for an election under the Fixed-Term Parliaments Act. Earlier on Friday, London's High Court ruled that British Prime Minister Boris Johnson acted lawfully when he ordered the suspension of Parliament for 5 weeks before Brexit, but it allowed the legal challenge to be taken to the Supreme Court. Johnson announced at the end of August that he would suspend Parliament from mid-September to mid-October, just before Britain is due to leave the European Union on October 31st, so the government could announce a new legislative programme. But the move enraged opponents who accused him of seeking to silence Parliament and prompted campaigner Gina Miller to challenge the order, arguing that the House of Commons should be sitting during such a momentous time in the country's history. More than 3 years after Britons voted to leave the bloc in a 2016 referendum, Brexit remains up in the air, with options ranging from a last-minute divorce deal, a turbulent no-deal exit, or abandoning the whole endeavour altogether.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel said that the rights and freedoms of people in Hong Kong must be guaranteed after meeting with the Chinese Prime Minister Li Keqiang in Beijing. Hong Kong has been plunged into months of protests, and ahead of the visit to China this week, protesters in the city appealed to the German Chancellor to support them in the meetings with the Chinese leadership. Merkel arrived in China overnight and is scheduled to meet the Chinese President Xi Jinping on Friday evening for dinner or giving a speech to the university students and meeting a local business in the city of Wuhan on Saturday. And Zimbabwe's former President Robert Mugabe has died at the age of 95 in Singapore, where he has received medical treatment in recent years. The details in the upcoming report.
Zimbabwe's former President Robert Mugabe, one of Africa's longest-serving presidents, has died aged 95 in Singapore, where he had been hospitalized in April after suffering ill health. Announcing the news about Mugabe's health, Zimbabwe's President Mnangagwa tweeted, saying Mugabe was an icon of liberation, a Pan-Africanist who dedicated his life to the emancipation and empowerment of his people. His contribution to the history of our nation and continent will never be forgotten. Also, opposition party leader Nelson Chamisa paid tribute to Mugabe, saying that despite great political differences with his regime, he recognized the contribution made during his lifetime as a nation's founding president. Regionally, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa remembered Mugabe as a champion of Africa's cause against colonialism, while Kenyan leader Uhuru Kenyatta hailed Mugabe as a freedom fighter and a pan-Africanist who played a major role in shaping the interests of the African continent. Internationally, China lauded him as an outstanding national liberation movement leader, while Russian President Vladimir Putin noted Mugabe's great personal contribution to Zimbabwe's independence.
Egypt's stock market gained nearly £3.1 billion during last week's dealings, with the market capital reaching £773 billion compared to £770 billion a week earlier. A weekly report released by the stock market showed that the market indices were mixed, with the benchmark EGX 30 index adding 6.6%. The report also added that the medium cap index, the EGX 70, was down 3%, and the more expanded index, the EGX 100, edged higher 1%. The report said that the overall transactions and dealings increased to reach £19 billion. And finally, the Export and the Import Control Authority said that the Egyptian non-petroleum exports increased by 2%, where the exports recorded $45 million to reach $2.21 billion in July, compared to $1.976 billion in the previous month. The monthly data showed that the non-oil industrial exports last July reached $1.695 billion, adding that the Egyptian non-oil food exports reached £325 million in the same period. Concerning the most important 20 industries from the Egyptian non-petroleum exports, the report showed that the crude oil production topped the list, followed by gold and nitrogen fertilizers, as well as the wires and the electric cables. And this brings us to the end of the economic segment of Egypt News for today, as well as the news bulletin itself. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.